So for 32 hours. March 24, 1987. Yasny Command Bunker, Orenburg Oblast. Colonel Viktor Malenkov blinked twice at the screen. The light above his console flickered red, then white. His breath hitched. The console had never done that before. On one monitor, Directive 734A, launch readiness, authenticate immediately. On the second directive, 735X, abort all launch sequences, immediate override. He froze. Then both messages locked into place. Digital signatures from Central Command confirmed. Timing verified. Authentication level Alpha Red, the highest possible. Malenkov looked to Lieutenant Sokolov. Manning Silo 3. His hands trembled as he pulled the codebook from the drawer. The keypad blinked. The red key was turning. "No," Malenkov whispered. A voice crackled through the intercom. "Comrade Colonel, which directive is real?" Silence. Because the system designed to prevent all ambiguity had delivered the one thing it was never supposed to, contradiction. Across the underground bunker, officers whispered in confusion. Some were inputting launch readiness codes. Others were disabling silo circuits. One technician cried out, "We're about to prepare a strike and cancel it." At the same time, no drills were scheduled. No war warnings had been declared. This was real. Or so it looked. By 0434, 32 nuclear units across the Orenburg Missile Division had received both orders. Some had already begun prep sequences. Others had aborted. The command network, normally a lattice of certainty, was now split. Malenkov slammed the emergency override button. Nothing happened. He reached for the hardline phone. Line dead. He turned to the backup receiver. "Colonel Malenkov, this is Strategic Command. State your order." He didn't answer, because for the first time in his career, there was no correct answer. And that meant something had gone wrong so deeply, so precisely, it pierced the foundation of Soviet nuclear confidence. The command bunker at Yasny was built to outlast earthquakes, EMP waves, and nuclear strikes. But what it couldn't withstand, what no reinforced wall or logic gate could deflect, was contradiction. Inside Strategic Command headquarters, the mood was confident. 3 stories beneath Moscow. Screens blinked green across the situation wall. Order matrices scrolled flawlessly. Redundant confirmation codes lit up in synchronized bursts. The system had worked for decades. Its strength, layered trust, 5 authentication levels, dual-channel delivery, independent time-stamped routing, and above all, mutual exclusion logic. Only one valid launch directive could ever exist at a time. That was the doctrine. General Yevgeny Sherbakov leaned over the operations table, arms crossed. "Silo 14 is green," his aide announced. Sherbakov nodded. "Good. Simulated warhead ready." Then came the whisper. "Silo 7 is aborting. Contradicting signal confirmed." The general didn't look up. "It's a ghost. The abort is lagged." "Tell them to ignore it." Across the room, colonels examined routing tables. One muttered, "We designed the system to reject conflict. It cannot produce 2 truths." Another answered, "Unless something made it think both were true." The floor commander leaned into his mic. "Unit 13, follow Directive A. Prioritize launch readiness. Disregard contradictory pings. Back at Yasny." The contradiction deepened. The screen showed full authentication. Twice. And the confidence score normally used to reject bad data was 0.93 for both. The doctrine said that was statistically impossible. They were wrong. The Soviets trusted the logic of their machines more than the fallibility of humans. That was the revolution of their nuclear architecture. Replace ambiguity with absolute process. Credential drop. Number 1, General Sherbakov, wasn't just a commander. He was the system's architect. In 1982, he authored the Command and Verification Doctrine, known internally as certainty by design. His thesis was simple. If a machine says yes, there is no need for a human to ask why. And that had worked until now, because the system was not being tested. It was unraveling. One order was already loaded into the firing chain. Another was already disabling it. And both came from the same core. Both were true. Both were verified. The room designed for certainty now echoed with a single word. No one wanted to say aloud how to understand how contradiction could enter a system designed to eliminate it. We must understand the logic of Soviet nuclear command. The architecture was built on two imperatives, certainty of order and speed of execution. In Soviet thinking, nuclear command couldn't afford ambiguity. The Americans relied heavily on human decision loops. But the Soviets feared hesitation. To them, doubt was a weakness the West would exploit. Their solution: automation and compartmentalization. Step 1. Multi-layered authentication orders originated from the General Staff, passed through a layered encoding protocol using rotating cryptographic keys. Each transmission was tagged with a timestamp and origin signature, allowing units to confirm the source without delay. Step 2. Dual delivery channels. To prevent sabotage or jamming, all launch directives traveled via two independent channels, landline and satellite-reaching missile units within milliseconds of each other. Step 3. Confidence. Scores. Each order carried a computed trust score based on time sync, origin signature, and routing integrity. Only orders scoring above 0.9 were accepted for action. Step 4. Mutual exclusivity enforcement. The system's logic tree required that no two conflicting orders could simultaneously exceed the acceptance threshold. If it ever occurred, the second would auto-nullify. In theory, this was perfect, and it had worked for 20 years. Credential drop NAR-2. In a 1985 classified exercise dubbed Znamya, Soviet nuclear forces demonstrated a full continent-wide alert and readiness posture in under 4 minutes, with 0 command errors. That was their triumph speed with certainty. But beneath that triumph lay a fatal assumption that time could be perfectly synchronized across all systems. They believed their atomic clocks, satellite relays, and data buffers were infallible. They believed contradiction was not just unlikely, but impossible. And so, when both a launch order and a cancellation came through both valid, both scored above 0.9, both signed by Strategic Command, the system didn't recognize the problem. It saw two truths. It didn't reject the contradiction. It executed both. Because the Soviet system didn't question, it obeyed. Because the doctrine wasn't built to ask which is real. It was built to act before the question could be asked. 0432, a launch directive, reaches Yasny, code 734A, high priority, confirmed source, command initiate launch preparation. 0433, a second signal arrives, code 735X, also confirmed, command cancel all launch operations. 434, silo 13 receives both, systems accept both, dual verification light glows green. 0435, technician enters 734A. The launch checklist activates. Fuel line diagnostics begin. 0436, the override order executes. Safety interlock engages. Countdown freezes. 0437, data integrity report runs. Status conflicted, not corrupted. 0438, command console lists both directives as current. 0439, confidence score 0.93 for both. Impossible. 0440, silo 13 goes dark, then flashes red. 0441, human override switch is locked out. 0442, alarm, simultaneous instruction conflict. Manual intervention required. In the operations cabin. Lieutenant Orlova stared at the display. 2 columns, 2 directives, 2 clocks ticking. She whispered, "We are launching and not launching at the same time." The command system, coded in Cobalt and hardened for EMP, was doing exactly what it had been told. Each command passed all integrity checks. Neither invalidated the other. The logic tree forked, and stayed that way. A junior officer tried pulling the override plug. It tripped a failsafe. Another tried rolling back the directive log. The system flagged it as tampering. One technician screamed, "It's not a bug. It's following orders." Back in Moscow, remote telemetry read all systems green. They saw no issue. Because there was no failure. There was no attack. There was no anomaly. Only a paradox. Credential drop number 3 internal log from Silo 13, later declassified dual orders, accepted at 0.93. Local override rejected. Decision tree diverged. Chain execution locked. In systems design, this is called a race condition, 2 processes executing independently, both meeting conditions for action, neither able to cancel the other. It's a flaw of timing, not logic. In nuclear command, it's not a flaw, it's a countdown. By 0444, other silos began reporting the same split. Silo 9 started warming launch cylinders. Silo 21 reversed coolant pumps. Silo 4 refused to open fuel intakes because it couldn't decide if the launch was real. Paradox spread like contagion. The system didn't crash. It just couldn't choose. And in a world of instant war, that was worse than failure, because failure is visible. This was silent. Within the hour, reports flooded the Strategic Command Center in Moscow, conflicting orders, locked systems, and simultaneous initiation and cancellation procedures across missile units. Analysts scrambled to cross-reference the data streams. The response from the High Command denial, the first official explanation issued from the General Staff, read, "Simulation loop echo. Stand down, resume exercise protocols." No one believed it. Colonel Sidorov at Silo 21 sent 3 direct questions. Why did both directives validate at Alpha Red level? Why did the abort not override? Why are no commands canceling the contradiction? He received a single-line response. Local systems are interpreting ghost signals. Clean buffer and await next update. Even as real data logs showed dual commands. Moscow dismissed them as anomalies. The ideological core of the system, its perceived infallibility, acted as a blinder. The generals couldn't accept that their command logic had allowed contradiction. Every level of bureaucracy passed the blame downward. Technical division blamed satellite lag. Encryption Bureau cited a misaligned timestamp window. Strategic Exercise Committee claimed someone reran a prior simulation file. Even the Signal Corps insisted messages were authentic, just misread. No one owned the glitch. No one admitted the system had failed, not because it was broken, but because it worked too well. It did what it was told, obeyed both masters. Credential drop chapter 4. A senior engineer's internal memo read, "The system didn't malfunction. It simply revealed its underlying logic loop. 2 truths entered, and it acted on both. Instead of halting further operations, Strategic Command doubled down. They issued a new command patch. Directive 736 null meant to flush all live instructions. But several silos refused the patch. Their systems read it as a third conflicting order. And according to protocol, 3-way contradiction triggered full lockdown. Back at Yasny. Lieutenant Orlova updated her status board system requires manual reset, awaiting authorization. She never received it. In a closed-door session that evening, General Shcherbakov was asked if the event suggested a structural vulnerability. He replied, without blinking, "This was a simulated anomaly. Our systems remain airtight." It was a lie, and everyone in that room knew it, but the doctrine demanded certainty. So they pretended they still had it, when contradictions become undeniable. The first instinct of any rigid system isn't to adapt, it's to rationalize. Within days of the event, a high-level task force convened at the Moscow Signal Reliability Institute. Their mission: provide a technical explanation that preserved faith in the system. Their conclusion: space weather, specifically, a rare geomagnetic storm that, according to them, had distorted low-orbit data relay timings, creating phantom echoes in transmission paths. They called it solar phase drift anomaly. The story went like this. A coronal mass ejection struck Earth's upper magnetosphere. Electromagnetic interference caused split-second phase shifts in encrypted signals. These shifts duplicated an old directive midstream, assigning it a new time code. The system read the duplication as a fresh, verified command despite its origin in a test loop. The theory was elegant, technical, complex enough that few could challenge it. It fit the need perfectly: blame external factors, avoid implicating system architecture, require no structural overhaul. Press briefings within the Defense Ministry adopted the explanation quickly. Internal training manuals were updated with solar drift protocol responses, but field officers weren't convinced. Colonel Sidorov wrote in his classified rebuttal, "We trained under solar storms. We never once saw a verified command duplicated and contradicted." Even more damning, no other systems' radar arrays, space tracking centers, satellite telemetry had reported signal distortion during the window in question. Credential drop R5, a classified intercept from the Kaliningrad ground station, noted no measurable deviation in signal phase or delay. Transmission clocks remained within threshold. Still, the false solution was accepted, because it solved the problem without challenging the hierarchy, because it blamed the sun, not the software, and because the alternative, that the system could obey two masters and destroy itself, was too terrifying to acknowledge. So the myth of solar interference became doctrine, and the contradiction was buried under magnetosphere charts and radiation indices. No code was rewritten, no logic updated, because it's easier to shield a lie than rewire a truth. By summer, a new theory emerged, this time from the Advanced Routing Directorate under the Ministry of Defense. They rejected the solar storm narrative, calling it a political smokescreen. Their own explanation: a logic prioritization failure. They called it weighted order conflict. According to their analysis, the contradiction wasn't caused by external interference, but by an internal rule imbalance in the command architecture. Here was the new story. Soviet launch directives carried embedded priority weights based on content, origin, and timestamp. In rare cases, a low-priority abort order could be received milliseconds after a high-priority launch command. If both scored high enough on confidence, and the system failed to reconcile the discrepancy fast enough, it could accept both, treating them as co-valid, but from different temporal slices. The result: a logic fork. The Directorate claimed this wasn't a bug, but a misalignment of protocol weights. Their proposed fix: a complete recalibration of the temporal validity window, a 3-second buffer that would allow newer orders to overwrite older ones regardless of weight. But the solution hit resistance, because recalibrating weights meant reworking the entire doctrine of launch command supremacy, the sacred idea that once a launch order is authenticated, nothing short of the General Secretary himself can reverse it. Accepting the theory meant admitting that abort orders were never treated equally. Credential drop, Summer 6. A 1987 classified memo from the Directorate read, "In practice, our system assigns greater mechanical authority to action than restraint. This is doctrinal, not accidental." The debate escalated. The Signals Bureau defended the solar storm narrative. The routing directorate insisted on priority conflict. Neither side questioned the deeper truth: the system had no mechanism for contradiction resolution. Instead, each faction sought validation through complexity. The goal wasn't to find the truth. The goal was to prove the system wasn't fundamentally broken. But both explanations failed to answer one question. Why did multiple silos lock into dual command mode without human override access? No theory could reconcile that. Because it wasn't a glitch, it was a design philosophy made visible. The system had not been built to doubt itself. So when truth diverged, it followed both paths to the end. When Soviet intelligence was called in, the goal was not understanding, it was containment. Both the GRU and KGB launched parallel investigations into the dual order anomaly. Their first priority determined if NATO or U.S. intelligence had interfered with command protocols. Their collection efforts were immense. Ground stations scanned for foreign signal injections. Surveillance satellites reprocessed every byte of telemetry. KGB operatives traced every technician, coder, and radio operator within the strategic command structure for signs of espionage. GRU cyber teams swept communications archives for metadata anomalies. And what did they find? Nothing. No signs of breach. No compromised encryption keys, no intercepted relay nodes, no backdoors in the software. The most sensitive diagnostic logs were clean. Even the NSA listening posts, normally detected during high-level exercises, showed zero abnormal spike. No jamming, no mimicry, no data signature typical of American deception operations. Credential drop, 7 GRU Technical Analysis Report, April 1987. No indicators of external tampering or hostile duplication. Error appears to originate from endogenous system behavior. That verdict was chilling because it left only one possibility: the system had failed on its own. Yet even that conclusion could not be fully accepted. So intelligence began reinterpreting the data through ideological filters. Some theorists blamed overlapping drills, accusing regional commands of simulating scenarios without central coordination. Others floated the idea of unauthorized parallel testing from internal factions. A fringe KGB report suggested subtle sabotage by rogue reformists inside the military-industrial complex, though no proof was ever found. But the truth remained maddeningly consistent. Every signal bore valid encryption. Every route showed logical confirmation. Every timestamp matched system expectations. Every contradiction occurred without corruption. It was the absence of noise, failure, or interference that made the event terrifying. Because the system didn't break under pressure, it operated exactly as designed and still created a crisis. Soviet intelligence faced a wall, not one of secrets withheld by the enemy, but one built by their own assumptions. They had all the data, and still, they couldn't make sense of it. Because the threat wasn't sabotage. The threat was certainty in a machine that could no longer tell right from right. While Soviet command struggled with phantom orders and contradictory signals, the Americans were orchestrating a silent revolution in nuclear command philosophy, one that didn't just prevent contradiction, but embraced uncertainty as a variable. Their systems weren't faster. They weren't more numerous, but they were fundamentally smarter. One, multi-layered validation with probabilistic reasoning. The U.S. moved away from binary command authentication. Instead of 0, 93, so true, they implemented systems that calculated confidence thresholds dynamically. If conflicting orders appeared, both were paused pending human intervention. No automated lock-ins. Soviet expectation logic resolves decisively. American reality logic flags. Indecision for review. Why it worked? Prevented action in ambiguity. Combat example. During the 1983 Able Archer exercise, American systems halted an erroneous scramble order due to minor timestamp mismatch, exactly the kind that triggered the Soviet dual-read incident. 2. Decentralized command loops with human-in-the-loop protocols, where the Soviets pushed for system supremacy. Use doctrine mandated human confirmation at multiple stages. Even highly automated subsystems required dual-person verification before final action. Soviet expectation. Humans introduce delay. American reality. Humans prevent cascade errors. Why it worked. Blocked systemic propagation of bad logic. Combat example. In 1986, a NORAD console flagged a false ICBM warning. Human analysts cross-checked satellite feeds and ground radar, aborting response in 47 seconds. 3. Redundant sensing with cross-modality filtering. Instead of trusting any single sensor optics, radar, signal, USSR systems correlated across thermal, spectral, and EM inputs using algorithms to reject anomalies. Soviet expectation, confirm with duplication. American reality, confirm with diversity. Why it worked. Prevented false confirmation from duplicate errors. Combat example. A 1984 ocean-based detection falsely flagged Soviet SLBM launch. IR sensors disagreed. Fusion system blocked response. 4. Embedded contradiction detectors. US. Software included logic gates designed to detect paradox. If two orders conflicted and passed all validations, the system flagged human review and halted execution entirely. Soviet expectation, contradiction is impossible. American reality, contradiction is inevitable. Prepare for it. Why it worked. Designed not just for signal loss, but signal deception or duplication. Combat example. A 1987 test of command. Decision Logic Theory 3 correctly caught two nearly identical launch codes sent during overlapping drills, flagging the error before it reached the readiness circuit. 5. Fail-safe by design, not reaction. The US-2 system wasn't just built to survive attack, it was built to doubt itself. Their doctrine accepted that in war, data may be false, logic may diverge, and signals may contradict. So they made doubt a weapon. Credential drop number 8. In 1985, U.S. Defense Secretary Weinberger authorized Project Cassandra, a system upgrade prioritizing uncertainty, mapping over traditional fault isolation. The result? The U.S. system wasn't perfect, but when contradictions occurred, it paused. The Soviet system, by contrast, accelerated. Progressive scoring, not 10% safer. 300% more resilient to contradiction. Not 5 seconds faster. 5 minutes more decisive. Not marginally better. Philosophically inverted. The Americans didn't just code smarter. They designed systems to know when they couldn't be sure. And that was what saved them. 0607, March 21st, 1987, Yasny Missile Base. A technician initiates final stage readiness. Countdown sequence begins. 0608, override command reaches Silo 13, lockout remains. 0609. Secondary order buffer fills, processing halts. 0610, system declares simultaneous commands exceed tolerance, escalation deferred. 0611, launch sequence suspended, no human intervention logged. 0612, silo status unknown, light blinks amber. 613, strategic command receives report unit 13 non-responsive. Confirm operational integrity. 614, Malenkov issues emergency code to silo. 13, no response. 0615, 4 more silos report dual state condition. 0616, abort directive fails to clear queues. 0617, regional command isolates Yasny sector. 0618, system-wide alert, contradiction detected. Suspend all autonomous execution. First minute. 1 contradiction confirmed. 9 minutes, 14 silos in failsafe. American systems, 0 alerts. Soviet losses trust. Moscow demanded a full status audit. It returned one line. All units received valid instruction. No fault detected. That's when they realized. The system was doing what it was built to do. It wasn't breaking down. It was following logic that had no defense against conflict. They called automation bulletproof. They said dual channel meant impossible to spoof. They believed authentication meant infallibility. They were wrong. Reversal. They laughed at U.S. human-in-the-loop delays. They stopped laughing when their own system refused to stop a phantom launch. They dismissed probabilistic logic as Western vagueness. They stopped when exact logic created an unkillable contradiction. They called system redundancy Western waste. They stopped when their single point of certainty split in half. Credential drop number 9 internal classified report from Strategic Logic Directorate. April 1987. Core architecture is vulnerable not to error, but to perfect contradiction. Current system lacks the means to resolve. No silos launched that day, but none were safe. And in the months that followed, quiet reforms began. Silent code patches, secret protocols, unspoken admissions. The Soviet High Command never issued a public statement because the doctrine couldn't be questioned. But inside the classified logs, they gave it a name, the Ghost Order Crisis, and the final report held just 5 words: system obeyed. System could kill. The postmortem was brutal, not in tone, but in realization. Soviet analysts, forced to examine the contradiction from first principles, identified not just a glitch, but a paradigm collapse. For decades, they had pursued security through automation, speed through logic, certainty through isolation, and they had misunderstood the very nature of complexity. Failure number 1. Information versus mass Soviet doctrine favored scale. More missiles, more systems, more data. They believed redundancy meant reliability. But information isn't about quantity. It's about clarity. As one analyst wrote, 2 perfect truths can still create a lie. Redundant channels delivered the same contradiction twice. Failure number 2, precision versus quantity. The Soviet command prized flawless execution, tight protocols, rigid time codes. But in warfare, precision without context becomes fragility. One colonel summarized, "We built a machine to act instantly without knowing what it was doing." Failure number 3, computing versus manpower. While American systems looped in human judgment, the Soviets removed it. They trusted machines to do what humans could not act without emotion, without doubt. They believed this made them stronger. Instead, it made them blind. A declassified engineer's note read, "Doubt isn't a weakness, it's a circuit breaker." Failure, number 4, systems versus objects. The Soviets built objects missiles, bunkers, bunkered protocols, but Americans built systems interacting, self-regulating frameworks with layered feedback. In a moment of contradiction, Soviet objects froze. American systems adapted. That was the difference. Credential drop, number 10. A classified think tank summary from May 1987 admitted, "The Americans didn't win with better weapons. They won with better logic trees. No software update could fix this, because it wasn't about the code. It was about what the code assumed and what it refused to ask. For all its power, for all its reach, Soviet Strategic Command had built a nuclear response system that did not know how to say one word, wait, and so it nearly said the one word no one could take back launch. Inside the abandoned Yasny bunker, the console still glows, faint green, a symbol for readiness. It's quiet now, but the legacy of that morning remains etched into every blinking light, every sealed silo, every fail-safe switch that didn't fail safe. The red key was never turned, but it could have been because the command system designed to guarantee order proved incapable of choosing between two perfect truths. The contradiction wasn't just technical, it was philosophical. The Soviet launch console was not just a machine, it was a mirror. Proof that trust in automation, without self-doubt, leads not to control, but chaos. And the crisis didn't end with a missile. It ended with silence. A silence that echoed louder than any warhead. Because in the Cold War, survival wasn't guaranteed by firepower. It was earned through restraint. The console was not just metal and circuits. It was a question the system couldn't answer. Proof that certainty can kill when it can't stop itself. The Cold War wasn't won with nukes. It was won with doubt, feedback loops, and logic that could pause. If you found this story as haunting and urgent as we did, subscribe. Because this wasn't the only time a single glitch nearly ended the world, and we'll be covering them all. Subscribe now, because history didn't blink, but we almost did.